Welcome to part 2 of the Aryan race, where we will be discussing the history of Romanticism and the influence of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss another video. The early theory of the Indo-Europeans appropriated a more nationalistic significance through the German intellectuals of the Romantic era. The Romantic movement was rooted in the widespread disillusionment after the Reign of Terror and the dictatorship of Napoleon, followed by the French Revolution, which was blamed on an excessive emphasis on reason and scientific rationalism. Before 1750, upper-class Germans looked to France for intellectual, cultural and architectural leadership, as France was the language of high society. By the 18th century, the Aufklärung, meaning the Enlightenment, transformed German high culture in music, philosophy, science, and literature. Romanticism therefore instead emphasized the individual, the subjective, the irrational, the imaginative, the personal, the spontaneous, the emotional, the visionary, and the transcendental. Romanticism was linked to the Counter-Enlightenment, a term first used by Isaiah Berlin to refer to a movement that arose primarily in the late 18th century and the early 19th century Germany against the Enlightenment ideals of rationalism, universalism, and empiricism. Berlin's essay The Counter-Enlightenment argues that while there were opponents of the Enlightenment outside of Germany, such as Joseph de Maistre, the German reaction to the French Enlightenment and Revolution, imposed upon them first by the reforms of Frederick II the Great, then by the armies of revolutionary France, and finally by Napoleon, was crucial to the shift of consciousness that occurred in Europe at this time, leading eventually to Romanticism. Berlin identifies the chief inspiration behind the anti-rational movement as Johann Georg Hamann, a Kabbalist and Bohemian. Also from Königsberg, Hamann was also formerly in contact with Kant, who he sent to Hume and Rousseau. Hamann, who was known as the Magi of the North, disputed the claims of pure secular reason and was exceptionally influential in his time. Hamann was used by Herder as the main support of the Sturm und Drang movement, where individual subjectivity and, in particular, extremes of emotion were given free expression. Hamann's thesis, explains Berlin, rested on the conviction that reason is impotent to demonstrate the existence of anything, and that instead all knowledge relies on faith. Hamann celebrated Hume's defiance against the claim that there is a priori source to reality, insisting that all knowledge is ultimately dependent on perception. Hamann believed that scientific analysis of truth only produced empty calculations, and therefore cared only for the interpersonal life of the individual, art, and religious experience. God is a poet, not a mathematician, he declared. Hamann was a mentor to Herder, a Spinozist. Herder broke new ground in philosophy and poetry as a leader of the Sturm und Drang, meaning storm and stress, proto-romantic movement in the German literature and music that occurred between the late 1760s and early 1780s. In 1762, Herder had enrolled at the University of Königsberg, where he became a student of Immanuel Kant, who had tried to reconcile rationalism and religious belief, individual freedom and political authority. In 1774, Herder, who according to Glenn Alexander Maggie was a lifelong Hermeticist, published about the oldest document of the human race, which discussed the Hermes Trismegistus and the Kabbalah. In 1801, in his journal Adrastia, Herder published a dialogue between Hermes and Pomander, styled after the dialogues found in the Corpus Hermeticum. Although they only met once, Herder much admired the work of Moses Mendelssohn. As a young man, Herder expressed his respect for Mendelssohn, who was 15 years his senior, referring to the Literature Brief as the best German journal, a journal which Moses Mendelssohn edited. Herder spoke of Mendelssohn as the German Socrates. Socrates brought philosophy to mankind. Here is the writer of our nation who is supposed to have united philosophy with beauty of style. It is he, indeed, who knows how to put his philosophy into the light of clearness, as if the muse herself had said it. Herder had read Mendelssohn's Phaedon and resolved to enter a correspondence with him to discuss with him his objections, but after one letter in 1769, Herder declared himself not satisfied with the philosopher's explanations. But in 1779, Herder sent Mendelssohn his treatise on the Book of Revelation. After Lessing's death in 1781, Herder again wrote to Mendelssohn to console him and confessed, "I love you heartily and sincerely, and like you more with each advancing year of my life. You see, my friend," Herder wrote, "how holy and exalted these books are for me, and how much I, according to Voltaire's scornful words, become a Jew when I read them." Herder added, "Israel was and is the most distinguished people of the earth, in its origin and continued life up to this day, in its good and bad fortune, in its merits and faults, in its humiliation and elevation so singular, so unique that I consider the history, the character, the existence of the people, the clearest proof of the miracles and the writings of which we know and possess of it. Herder put forward that to a large extent the faults of the Jews were caused by the cruel treatment they received from the nations who hosted them. Herder argued that Jews in Germany should enjoy the full rights and obligations of Germans, and that non-Jews of the world owed a debt to Jews for centuries of abuse, and that this debt could be discharged only by actively assisting those Jews who wished to do so to regain political sovereignty in their ancient homeland of Israel. Despite his romantic ideal of the Aryan race, Schlegel was married to Dorothea, the daughter of Moses Mendelssohn, member of the Illuminati and godfather of the Jewish Haskalah. Schlegel also collaborated with the famous German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a member of the Illuminati and an important influence on German Romanticism. Goethe was also influenced by the ideas of Jacob Boehme. According to Maggie, Goethe's work was a major conduit for the indirect influence of alchemy, Boheme, Kabbalah, and various other Hermetic offshoots. As a young man, he read Paracelsus, Basil Valentine, Van Helmont, Swedenborg, and the Kabbalah. In several instances, he used the imagery of the rose and the cross in Die Geheimnis, meaning the secrets. In 1768, Goethe participated in alchemical experiments with Susanna von Klettenberg, a follower of Count Zinzendorf. Goethe admitted into the strict observance in 1782, was initiated into the Illuminati in 1783, and became regent in 1784. Goethe was an enthusiastic Mason and composed songs and orations in honor of the deceased Masons. He shared Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry's quest for a universal religion. Goethe was a free thinker who believed that one could be inwardly Christian without following any of the Christian churches, whose histories he criticized as a hodgepodge of fallacy and violence. Goethe cited Spinoza alongside Shakespeare and Carl Linnaeus as one of the three strongest influences on his life and work. In his 1793 essay on Newton, Goethe praised Francis Bacon for his advocacy of experiment-based as one of the greatest strides forward in modern science. A year before his death in 1832, Goethe wrote that he had the feeling that all his life he had been aspiring to qualify as one of the Hypsisterians, an ancient Jewish pagan sect of the Black Sea region who worshipped Dionysus Sabazius. In Goethe's understanding, they sought to revere, as being close to the Godhead, what came to their knowledge of the best and most perfect. Many of Goethe's works, especially Faust, depict erotic passions and acts. Goethe wrote of both boys and girls, in quote, "I like boys a lot, but the girls are even nicer. If I tire of her as a girl, she'll play the boy for me as well." Goethe also defended pederasty, in quote, "Pederasty is as old as humanity itself, and one can therefore say that it is natural, and that it resides in nature, even if it proceeds against nature. What culture has won from nature will not be surrendered or given up at any price." Arthur Schopenhauer cited Goethe's Wilhelm Meister's Apprenticeship as one of the 4 greatest novels ever written. Ralph Waldo Emerson selected Goethe as one of the 6 representative men, along with Plato, Napoleon, and Shakespeare. There are frequent references to Goethe's writings throughout the works of Hegel, Schopenhauer, Soren Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Oswald Spengler, Hermann Hesse, Thomas Mann, Sigmund Freud, and Carl Jung. Goethe's poems were set to music throughout the 18th and 19th centuries by a number of composers, including Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, Wagner, Mendelssohn, Berlioz, and Mahler. Goethe wrote The Sorcerer's Apprentice in 1797, which was popularized in the animated 1940 Disney film Fantasia. In the poem, an old sorcerer leaves his apprentice with the chores to perform. Tired of fetching water by pail, the apprentice uses magic to enchant a broom to do the work for him. When he is unable to stop the broom, the apprentice splits the broom in 2 with an axe, but each of the pieces becomes a new broom that takes up a pail and continues fetching water. Now at twice the speed, finally the old sorcerer returns and breaks the spell, and advises the apprentice that powerful spirits should only be called by the master himself. Sir William Jones's translation of Kalidasa's Sanskrit play, The Recognition of Sakuntala, captured the admiration of many, notably that of Goethe, who expressed his admiration for the play. Goethe went on to borrow a device from it for his Faust. Part 1. Goethe's Faust was based on the legend of Dr. Faustus, first popularized by Christopher Marlowe. In the play, Mephistopheles makes a bet with God that he can lure Faust, God's favorite human being, who is striving to learn everything that can be known, away from righteous pursuits. Faust, despairing at the vanity of scientific, humanitarian, and religious learning, turns to magic for the showering of infinite knowledge. Faust makes an arrangement with the devil, where the devil will do everything that Faust asks while here on earth. And in exchange, Faust will serve the devil in hell. Ultimately, Faust goes to heaven, for he loses only half of the bet. Angels who arrive as messengers of divine mercy declare at the end of Act 5, he who strives on and lives to strive can earn redemption still. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notifications button. Leave your comments down below, and also check out the link in the description to the website, which will have all the sources for the information used in this video. And until next time, stay safe and stay knowing.